going to be talking about something that every Commander deck basically needs.
I'm your host, Joe Cherries.
I'm your host, BZ, and that makes us the Nitpicking Nerds. If you would like to feed the Nitpicking Nerds, and by extension, Amber, there's a Patreon for that. You can go give us the money, which will then feed all three of us.
Yes, without it, we don't eat food. And just think about how sad that truly is.
Picture me any skinnier. It's not possible.
You don't want pieces to be skinnier. And it's not just because I'm getting bigger eating all the food. It's because we just need more money.
We just need more. Most of it will go to me for this time.
This video, we have a sponsor. It's IntoTheAM, an awesome apparel company that makes these amazing shirts that you see not just today, but every single day on this channel. They have awesome designs. They're colorful. Sometimes they remove the color, but they still look amazing. You can even get shirts that are plain. They have so many different shirts, and on top of all that, and on top of looking cool and swaggy, you're comfortable. Every single one of these shirts is comfortable.
They're so comfortable. I would sleep in these, and I do sleep in these, actually, and I wake up in them and I go, wow, I'm being hugged by an angel, and I'm glad I had such a good night's sleep. Cherries has the colorful one on. I've got more of the basic, black and white, and we've got exclusive designs that we'd like to share with you. But also, you can use our link in the description to just literally save 10% on your order. We're talking real dollars that you're saving on buying wardrobe stuff.
You're going to be buying these clothes anyway because they're so damn cool.
Come on.
That's right. I said damn. That's how cool these shirts are. We barely ever swear in our videos. And I said damn.
That's 3 times.
I've said it 3 times because that's how great these shirts are. Go there, save the money, and look at these awesome shirts they got. Well, I'm wearing Vitruvian Alien. They also have
It's the Androidian Man.
The Androidian Man.
That's the design name.
Which is also a Vitruvian cyborg, whatever you want to call it. Well, they also have astronaut reading a drippy book. That is quite the design. That's a lot. There's so much going on here.
There's clearly, if you're wearing that shirt, you've got the drip. And there's Peacemonger. Now, that's the actual name of the shirt. We didn't give it an official Nitpicking Nerds name because I actually can't think of a more dramatic name. This is the most dramatic shirt I've ever seen. And in fact, the United Association of T-Shirts Institute named this the most dramatic shirt ever created.
The UATI, as everyone usually calls it, but BZ wanted to make sure everyone knew exactly what he was talking about.
They used to be the UTI, but that's not a good anagram, so they added the A.
The Universal Tees Institute.
Yes.
That was not good.
No, that was not good. Now, the topic of this video that every deck's going to be missing if they don't have it is recursion, Cherries. What is that?
Recursion, it's taking stuff that is in your graveyard that has been used, milled over, put there somehow during the game, and reusing it in some way, whether it be casting it from the graveyard, whether it be returning it to your hand, putting it on top of your deck. It's getting a resource that has been put into your graveyard, land, spell, or otherwise, and reusing it in some way.
Yeah, graveyards in general are resources that pretty much every deck should be using. There's weird exceptions if you're playing a bunch of rest in peace effects, but that's not really anyone we're talking to. So basically, every deck should be using recursion in some way.
Yes, exactly. Like you said, it is such a huge resource that will just happen. There is no way not to have a graveyard during a game of Magic, unless you said there is very few exceptions, those rest in peace type things. You should be focused on using that graveyard. It's going to come up. You play a sorcery, it goes to the graveyard. Creature dies, goes to the graveyard. All of a sudden, it's later in the game, there's 10, 15 cards in your graveyard. We're going to talk about the ways to use those.
The recursion allows you to use your greatest threats again and just redeploy them and go, oh, yeah, you got to answer this again. They can be versatile. They scale with the game, so your access to cards increases as the game goes on, and they almost kind of turn into this tutor, but they have functionality the whole way through.
Yeah, exactly. They can be used super early on even turn 2 or 3 just to get back something like a fetch land and put it back in play. It's so strong. The versatility of these cards, like you said, as the game goes on, it becomes a tutor. And whereas early in the game, it can just be get back your land. So much to do here. These cards can also get back win conditions. So as they can get back those simple cards that are, ramp, removal, card draw, your gravy, they can also get back your win condition because they're so strong. That lets you run less win conditions because you're able to return your win conditions from your graveyard back to play.
So you get less hands of oh man, there's 3, win the game cards in my hand. I can't keep this, but this is oh, well, it's a recursion spell, so that if the first one doesn't work, I can just replay it again.
Yes, and there's multiple ways to recur things. As we mentioned, you can return them to your hand. You can return them to the field, to the stack, or you can put them on top of your deck. It's all about getting it out of your graveyard and into a spot where you can use it.
Yeah, every card type can be recurred. We're going to talk about recursion for every card type with, I think, except Planeswalkers.
Yes, there's just not that many good ones, unless some of these spells that return any permanent type return your Planeswalkers.
This is true. There's differences between recursion spells and recursive spells. We might do a separate video on that, but recursive creatures, let's talk about like cards with flashback or Gravecrawler. They can be cast from your graveyard and they kind of get extra value, but we're not talking about those. So if you're thinking, where's this flashback card? Where's this card that reanimates itself? It's recursive. We're talking about cards that exclusively recur things, other things.
Yeah, they don't recur themselves, they recur other cards. And we're simply not counting things that use other players' graveyards. We're looking to recur the stuff we're using, the stuff in our graveyard. So we're going to exclude things like Sepulchral Primordial, great card, awesome card. We suggest playing it, especially on a budget.
It's just not really recursion.
But it's not recursion because we're bringing back their things.
Same with like Mimic Vat, although I wouldn't recommend playing Mimic Vat anyway. First, we're going to talk about cards that return cards in your graveyard to the top of your library, easily the most narrow version of recursion and the most shallow pool of playable cards.
Yeah, there's not that many, but the best ones, these aren't even close to the best ones. They're all lands, and there's a little cycle. There's Academy Ruins, which is one in the blue, tap it, put an artifact from your graveyard on top of your library. Heliod's Hall of Generosity, it's in that order. Don't read the actual card that's on screen right now. One in the white, put an enchantment from your graveyard on top of your library. In the original one, where these two cards originate from, Volrath Stronghold, one in the black, tap, put a creature on top of your library. All incredibly strong effects, especially because they're on lands.
Yes, and I really want to see the green one that like puts a land back, or the red one that puts a sorcery back or something. That'd be cool.
Yeah, that would be a really cool thing to see. There's two other lands that kind of have these same effects. They're Mystic Sanctuary, which is an island, meaning it's fetchable by all your fetch lands against islands, and it puts, as long as you have 3 other islands, it puts an instant sorcery from your graveyard on top. This card is incredibly strong, banned in multiple formats because of its strength. And Witch's Cottage, which is the same thing except for swamps and for creatures on top of your library.
Turns out, not banned in anything, way more fair. Still potentially playable if you have heavy black, especially if you want to have some utility, but you don't want to stray away from Cabal Coffers. Well, this is a swamp, so it doesn't really hurt your swamp count. I think these 5 are so ridiculously good because the opportunity cost to include them is so low. I don't really want to put stuff on top of my library. Why would I do that when I have all the rest of the cards that put them in play and into my hand? Why would I want to put them on top? Well, these cards are all lands. They just are in my mana base, and let's say 10% of games I'll do this.
Yeah, they're really, really strong because of lands. And actually, just to throw this in there, I don't like the card Mortuary Mire. It's a tapped land that does the exact same thing as Witch's Cottage, but has no chance to come in untapped. So Witch's Cottage is the one I want. I'm going to play it on my heavy swamp mana bases.
Yeah, there's some like niche spells that can do this. There's like Arcbound Reclaimer can put artifacts from the graveyard on top, and Cavalier of Thorns can put any card on top when it dies. Those are some decent examples of like to the top recursion. But other than that, there's not too much that comes to mind. Noxious Revival is one everybody talks about. We just don't really like that card all that much.
I'm not interested in this card. It's card disadvantage. I only like this card in really high power competitive CDH type stuff. And if you're not doing that, I honestly don't suggest playing this card. And Forever Young, this is a cool, unique effect. I don't know how often you really want it. If you want this effect, if you're playing, let's say, Sir Conrad the Grim, where there's an example that would play Forever Young, then play something like this. But usually you don't need to go for it. But it is a niche one that works sometimes.
Yeah, there's a lot of cards like this. This is easily the best one.
Now it's time to move on to the most thought of thing when you think of recursion. You're thinking of returning it from the graveyard straight to the battlefield. This is reanimation of all sorts, no matter what. And this also includes returning things to the stack. Like if you're going to cast an instant sorcery from your graveyard, that's returning it to the stack. We're putting those in the same category. They're essentially the same thing. Use the card from the graveyard directly.
Right now, yeah. You're not like casting it or anything. You just get it. You get to play the card. So we're going to start with some of the best ones in white. Sun Titan is going to, on attacks and ETB, bring a permanent card, mana value 3 or less, from your graveyard to the battlefield. Sevine's Reclamation, also going to do that. It has flashback, and you can copy it the next time around. These are super versatile. These have the ability to recur super powerful creatures in the late game, in the mid game, and lands when you need to ramp. And they just do basically everything.
Yeah, these cards are very, very versatile. Sun Titan is 6 mana and still very, very good. everything about these cards is strong. Like you said, the fact that they are ramp when you need it to be, or just a spell when you don't need it to be that ramp for you. They're so good. And Sivin's Reclamation going to be one of the few examples of a spell that is recursion and recursive.
Yes, it is a recursive recursion card.
Not confusing at all.
How about Trove Warden?
Trove Warden is also an interesting one. It's similar to Sun Titan and Sivin's Reclamation in that it deals with permanents with mana value 3 or less. This one, whenever a land enters the battlefield, exile a permanent with mana value 3 or less underneath it, and then when Trove Warden leaves, you get all of them directly to the battlefield. I had a Trove Warden literally stacked with like 7 or 8 cards under it one time.
And it wasn't the case that if they killed Trove Warden, you won the game?
I was just gonna win. I would just win when the Trove Warden died. And I'm playing that's part of my new Thalia Gitrog deck. That sacrifices cards.
Yes, it definitely does. Trove Warden can be good. Not every deck, but keep an eye out for when Trove Warden is just off the wall bonkers in your deck.
Well, play it in your white landfall decks. It's not a lot of decks. There's not a ton of decks, but if you are playing landfall and in white, it's amazing.
And I would say whether you're building mono white landfall or any other type of deck, you're going to need some kind of online resource, and I can't think of anything better than... Actually, I don't remember.
Okay. All right, we'll just have to move on to the next card.
Really awkward. Sorry about that.
That was awkward, yeah. Aghanim's Awakening is our next card, and Aghanim's Awakening might be the best card in this whole entire list, and that's saying something. This list has the card Reanimate on it.
Yes.
Coming up. This card is absolutely absurdly good, and the main thing is it's a land on the back that comes in untapped when you pay 3 life. Holy crap, my land is now reanimating a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 drop. This card is absolutely absurd. There's no card like it, and the front side, which is already a good Magic card, already awesome. What? It has a lead in the back. What is going on with this card?
Yeah, the front side is one of the only MDFCs where people are interested in playing it potentially by itself, and then it's like, well, it's also just a land. Aghanim's Awakening is one of the best ways to actually bake recursion into your deck so that you have more bites at some of your more powerful spells without really giving anything up at all. So you can have a deck, if you send me a deck and it's got no recursion in it, I can send it back to you with the same theme and everything, and I'm adding cards like Aghanim's Awakening where now you have more legs in the late game, and you can just bounce back from these board wipes and stuff a lot easier.
Can you believe it's hard to believe, but the Nitpicking Nerds are suggesting you play MDFCs in your deck for what, the 150th video in a row, most likely?
Now, Zendikar Rising was just like the best commander set.
Is there a video where we haven't said MDFCs are good? I feel like it's every video.
Zendikar Rising changed commander. That's it.
Moving on, 2 awesome lands. I absolutely love both of these. We have Tomb Fortress and Port of Karnfell. Both enter tapped. One makes blue, one makes black. And then you sacrifice them, pay their premium cost, whatever it is. One Karnfell wants you to pay blue and black. Mono black for the Tomb Fortress of the Tomb. You mill some cards, and then you reanimate a creature straight to the battlefield. Getting reanimation on the land is no joke. It is super strong, and it's a slot that's hard to interact with. This will be on the battlefield sitting there. They're not going to strip mine this. Who's going to kill this?
You can also hold it up and go, am I holding up Cyclonic Rift or Port of Karfell? You'll never know.
Tomb can only be activated as a sorcery. Still incredibly strong. If you're playing mono black, this has like so many extra points. Like, it's so good.
Yeah, kind of on the level now of like Trove Warden and Sun Titan and Savine's Reclamation. It's Sarah Paragon. It's not the most easily playable card. Some decks are going to have ways to slot it in, and if you can slot this card in, I would recommend it, because you get to put permanents that are 3 or less into play from your graveyard and just get recursive value, kind of like a mini Carador every turn.
Yeah, exactly. They will exile afterwards, so you can't use the same thing over and over again, such as the fetch land. Once you play that fetch land, and then you sacrifice it, it'll be gone forever.
Anyway, Emeria the Sky Ruin is a land that we're playing, and it doesn't even really ask anything of you. You can play a bunch of planes, and it doesn't ask anything in the form of mana. As soon as you have 7 planes, you just start every upkeep, just reanimating your best thing over and over. It's a value engine. It's a potential slow win con, but it's going to be an eyebrow raiser for the opponent. It's like, oh, we got to deal with that.
Yeah, it's an extremely slow card. It only goes in mono white. It's this is a narrow card. You're not putting this in a lot of decks, but as it gets going, it's very, very good. Next one, there's so many of these, and we're just going to list some of our favorites. These are the reanimation spells. Just straight up reanimate is the namesake of this card, of what we're talking about here. Return a creature from the graveyard to the battlefield. There's so many good ones, and like I said, we're not going to list them all. Reanimation is the best. Animate Dead, also an amazing card. Dread Return, absolutely stellar. Like, seriously, sometimes it gets cast for free, and you sacrifice basically nothing.
Ooh, it's Recursive Recursion.
Recursive Recursion! It is Recursive Recursion! Oh, my God. And Incarnation Technique is just become one of my favorites of all time. It's such a cool and awesome and strong card. 5 mana, get 2 things back. Your opponent basically gets crap.
Every time I've cast Incarnation Technique, I've just felt like I was cheating. I'm like, oh my god, this is so good. I feel almost bad for what's about to happen. Almost.
It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, so this is like the ways, if you're in a Reanimator deck or if you're in like a self-mill deck, here's some of the best recursions you probably already knew of, but other decks could potentially take advantage of this as well.
Yeah, something super interesting. Also, if you're a super creature heavy deck and you want to put the reanimation spell into a creature, we got Combat Guide and Phyrexian Delver. Both of them just enter. Phyrexian Delver literally reanimates. That's literally what it does when it enters. And Combat Guide does the reanimation, doesn't make you lose any life, but it's got an echo cost. So it's going to die and go to your graveyard.
Gosh darn it, I don't want it there. Oh, wait, yeah, I do.
Yeah, you do.
Perfect,
you do
yeah.
every single time.
Because its best friend, Revelark, is also a recursive card, and they go infinite together.
They do. Yeah, Revelark also a very good card. Play that one in your blink decks because, oh my god, it's when
Leaves
it
the
leaves
battlefield.
not when it dies. Such a great Magic card.
Thanks for the wording, Wizards.
Another thing, just like Phyrexian Delver is Junji, but this one does it when it dies. It'll return a creature from the graveyard to the battlefield, lose 2 life.
You only lose 2 life. Celestine's going to give you the life gain version of all this stuff. It reanimates based on how much life you gain every turn. So it's kind of like an Emiria, Karmic Guide hybrid, and it's going to be real annoying.
There's 3 versions of this card. Celestine.
Back to back.
I don't know the other 2. One's a Transformer.
Rodolph is the third one, and a Transformer is the other one.
Transformers.
Maybe Ratchet.
Transformers.
I think it is Ratchet.
There's literally 3 of this exact same effect. You gain life, return stuff from your graveyard to the battlefield. They're all really, really strong. Slot one into your deck if you want some recursion while you're playing life gain. Mayron's ridiculous. Do you have anything to say?
I think maybe some people kind of forget about playing her in the 99 because she's such a good commander, but if you're a deck that has black and green on it, you probably actually want Marin. She's like a 2-hand, kind of like a regrowth effect right away, and then if you have things die, she's just absurd.
Yeah, she gets absurd really, really fast. Yeah, I agree. She is a 99 card in a lot of situations. Budget card, Artisan of Kozilek, 9 mana, you get a 10-9 with Annihilator 2, and the best creature from your graveyard back to the battlefield.
And it's cast trigger, so even if it gets countered, you still get whatever you brought back with it. Like this card is another way to mix recursion into your deck that's already doing what it wants to do. This is a giant, big, fat monster that is then, let's add in a few here's my next biggest monster. Here's a Kodama. Here's something else.
Yeah, another card people often forget about because it's been banned in so many formats and just such a ridiculous card. Lurrus of the Dream Den, actually very, very good in Commander. When you build your deck to take advantage of this card, it's just absurd.
People associate Lurrus with only being able to play 2-drops. That's only if it's your companion. You can have this as your commander and just play whatever you want. You can have it in your deck and just play whatever you want and just use it as value.
Yeah, this card is stupid. All right, let's move on from returning creatures and let's return some other types. First, we got enchantments. Replenish. This card is absurd.
It's the go-to.
It's a reserve list card. It's like $100+. It's ridiculous. Return all your enchantments from the graveyard to the battlefield. Obviously, you need to be heavy enchantments. You're doing that. Perfect for your deck.
Decks are built around this card. Same is true of Retether, which returns all auras, and Mantle of the Ancient, which is an aura that returns all auras. They're both game enders, they're both backbreaking, and they're just like some of the reasons to play an enchantment deck.
Yeah, they're win cons. These are win cons. Mass Reanimation. Mass Reanimation just is a win con. Something we actually did not mention. We're mentioning Mass Reanimation. Living Death. I don't know how we managed to forget Living Death. One of the best recursive spells in the whole, or recursion spells. Don't get confused. They're not the same thing, and it's not confusing at all. It's seriously amazing. It's a win con because it's mass reanimation.
Sometimes just doing everything you did in the game again at the same time is enough to win the game. Who would have thought?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what Replenish does also.
Yes.
Like we just mentioned. Next, we're going to do that with, artifacts. Why don't we do it with Scrap Mastery and Wake the Past? Scrap Mastery is Living Death, but for artifacts. And Wake the Past is just bring them all back from your graveyard to play in the gain haste.
Yes, and you got one-offs like Duretti, Scrap Savant's going to go sack an artifact, get an artifact back, cheat mana cost like crazy, and Trash for Treasure is the same thing for 3 mana. You're cheating mana cost, you're reanimating, you're getting a ton of value, and you're probably getting value from the artifacts dying, so it's kind of like recycling and doing what your deck wants to do, and then, here's my best artifact.
Yeah, wow. Speaking of doing everything you've done during the game, but again, we have it again. This time,
the sorcery version.
It's the instant sorcery version. These are all good. Every version of these is good. This one's Mizzix Mastery. You can either just play an instant sorcery from your graveyard for free or overload it for 8 mana and do every instant sorcery in your graveyard.
Here's my whole deck. I'm going to win.
You cast so many spells. It just goes off and wins so often. Like, I don't know how many Mizzix Masteries overloaded have resolved and not resulted in a win.
Or haven't resolved because I just feel like scooping instead.
Yes, it's also a fair way to handle this card. It's like, oh, is that 15, 16 spells? Okay.
But like, nah, we're good, actually. No, we're good. Snapcaster Mage, kind of an overplayed card, actually. But it does let you cast a card from a graveyard. So it's like, oh, hey, great. My spell is going right from the graveyard onto the stack. Perfect. Mission Briefing is the same thing, except Mission Briefing, I think it might even just be better. It's another instant in your instant sorcery deck, and it lets you cast alternate modes on the cards.
Yeah, it's really interesting how the difference between formats shows, because Snapcaster is by far and away a better card than Mission Briefing in all of your one-on-one formats, where the 2-1 body is just much, much more relevant. That's not Commander.
I've been liking Mission Briefing. I don't play Snapcaster in anything.
I agree with you. I think Mission Briefing is much better in Commander, and I just thought it's an interesting comparison to draw, because Snapcaster it's not even remotely close.
That sentence is not true in any other format.
It isn't, yeah. Mission Briefing is better than Snapcaster, only is true in Commander.
Yes. Cast Dissonant Mage. This is your Carador for spells. This is your Celestine for spells. You get to cast a spell once per turn right onto the stack. Thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly. And this counts because it's going right to the stack, believe it or not.
Yes, recent overperformer, very annoying card, Gale, Waterdeep Prodigy, also better than Snapcaster Mage, I think. Lets you cast sorceries from your graveyard when you cast instants, and vice versa, and it breaks timing restrictions. And if you don't kill this thing, you're eventually going to have to deal with their entire graveyard again.
Yeah, exactly. This card is really, really strong and really, really annoying. Just make sure, as long as a deck has a mix of instants and sorceries, you're in. I want to make sure I'm close to even on them, so that I'm just bouncing back and forth on them.
Yeah, I want like 15 of both.
Yeah, exactly. At least 15 of both. Is it Chemister? This one's a budget card. I don't suggest too much off a budget, because the problem with this card is, though it gets ridiculous and pops off, the main issue that this card comes to is they see you doing it.
Yeah.
It's on the field, and as soon as you tap it, it can't do its other ability. They kill it.
Right.
This card has a big weakness, but this is an amazing budget card.
Yeah, I think once you can get one spell under it and lock it down, I think you're kind of good. You can hold up mana for counterspells or draw or whatever, and then as people appropriately tap out, you go, okay, let's lock another spell in. And now I'm never going to activate it again, other than to cast those 2 spells for free and get sick value. But now we got to talk about lands.
Yeah, and well, why not start in the land spot with, well, bringing back all of our lands as a win condition, because we've talked about it with every other type. It actually works with lands as well. World Shaper, absolutely love this card. It attacks and mills you, and then when it dies, all your lands just go from your graveyard to the battlefield. If you want that in sorcery form, Splendid Reclamation will do the same exact thing.
Yep, if you got landfall triggers out the wazoo, scoot swarms, scoop mobs, not scoop mobs terrible. Obnixilis, your damage dealers, your tunneling geopedes, the game's just over.
And now let's go to the playing lands from your graveyard stuff. Pretty much, I think that there is not a lot of cards that do this.
Yeah.
So every card that does it is, well, I think we listed the best ones here. But if the card says this line of text, it's good. I've not seen a card that they've printed that says play lands from your graveyard, be bad. We've got Crucible Worlds, the OG, the original, 3-mana artifact does it. Remnant Excavator, creature version of it, 3-mana, also does the same thing.
Let's just say, though, those cards literally have no other text on them. Like, we have a vanilla 2/3 and an artifact with no text that just say, play lands from your graveyard, and those are good.
Yes, they're good. And then there's versions that cost a little more mana, but do something else. Conduit of Worlds lets you play those lands from your graveyard, and if you haven't cast any other spells, play a permanent from your graveyard as your only spell for turn. It's just gravy. It's just gravy on top.
They just put more words on Crucible of Worlds.
Yes, and then Ancient Greed Warden, it is a payoff in your deck, because now it doubles your landfall triggers.
So it gives you, hey, play Ancient Greed Warden, play a land, get double landfall right away. So it's going to help recuperate some of the 6 mana that you just spent. And that brings us to the cards that bring cards from your graveyard to your hand. We'll play them later. We don't need to play them right now.
Yes, if you're playing a green deck, and you don't know what you want to put in, you can put these next 2 cards in any one of your green decks, and I think that's enough recursion to start with. Start with these, see how you like them, and then see if you want more recursion.
I bet you'll like them.
Because these are super staples of this format, cards that can go in any green deck. The first one, Eternal Witness. 3-mana, 2/1. When it enters, return any card from your graveyard to your hand. And then second, we got Balagad Recovery. 200 green for a sorcery. Return anything from your graveyard to your hand. But guess what? It's an MDFC. MDFCs are good. Nitpicking Nerds quote of all time.
Yes. Eternal Witness is reusable, repeatable, can be recurred because it's a creature, and there's a lot of cards that do that. That's probably the easiest hard type 2 recurs creatures. So Tonawanda, you can get multiple bites at it, especially if you're playing a blink deck. And Battleguard Recovery should probably just be in almost every green deck because it's so easy to include.
Yeah, exactly. Both these cards are very easy to include. Green just has synergies with creature all over the place. 1,000,001 different little cards that you're just going to put in your deck like a Beast Whisperer. Just synergize with this card. And like you said, Battleguard Recovery is just an MDFC. They're so good. Let's get into some like more specific ones that aren't just auto include super staples.
Well, hold on. We gotta shout out Timeless Witness. Do you know what that is? It's recursive recursion.
It is recursive recursion. Timeless Witness is not a super staple, though. I think you want to have some sort of synergy.
I like it for budget.
I like it for budget. I like it if you're milling over yourself, or if you have some other reasons, like you're playing Henzi. Really good
Henzi, yes. Much better than a Tonawanda in Henzi. We got Shigeki, Jukai Visionary. He has functionality outside of recursion. He can just come down and then mill you while also ramping you, and then go back to your hand where he can then recur things.
Yeah, exactly. Do you care about enchantments? This is probably good in the Enchantress deck because it's randomly an enchantment, this card.
Yeah, and it loops with the Tonawanda and Battleguard Recovery. You can get back Battleguard Recovery with Shigeki, and then use Shigeki to get back Battleguard Recovery and multiple other things.
Yes, silly. Next, we have Undead Butler, 2 mana. It mills you 3 cards when it enters, and when it dies, you can exile it and return a creature from your graveyard to your hand. Pretty simple. This is, again, you want a deck where you're going to be self-milling and having lots of creatures in your yard.
Yeah, it's built-in recursion. This is how you bake it into your deck. You got, you're playing like some kind of 3-mana 3/1 that mills you 3. No. Get this Undead Butler in. Not only is it cheaper, it mills you, and then it just has more words on it. And for endless creature recursion, we got Phyrexian Reclamation. You just got to pay 2 life and 2 mana, and you can just keep disentombing.
Yeah, I think the most important thing about this card to remember is make sure your deck has some life gain. It does add up really, really quickly. I'm not saying your deck has to be a life gain deck, but just make sure there's a few ways in there, like just a Gary. A Gary in there is enough to probably just reflect Phyrexian Reclamation it back. I could not get that word out.
How about Gix's Command, card I've been higher on lately? This card is kind of a 3-for-1. I'm pretty much always going to choose the mode that destroys or sacrifices my opponent's biggest power creature. And then I can just get 2 creatures back, and I feel pretty good about that.
That is a 5-for-1.
Yeah.
It's just a 5-for-1. It's absurd. I'm actually glad you came around that card because I was pushing it really hard in the beginning of the format, and it's good to see that you're like, oh, yeah, it's good.
Oh, I don't even remember that. I think I never didn't like the card, but I'm only liking it more.
I was more like saying I was pushing it harder, and I think I was pushing it harder than you wanted me to in the beginning, and now I'm glad that we've reached parity on it.
Tortured Existence. If you're playing Madness, this is probably the best card in your deck, and I hate you because I'm never going to be able to beat this thing as long as it's in play. Being able to discard, get value, and then recur is too much.
Yeah. I mean, it's so silly. You can just keep looping back and forth the same 2 creatures as long as there's some reason to be doing it. Oh, you're playing Sir Conrad the Grim? All right, go ahead. Just loop them back and forth over and over again because they're dying from you doing it.
They're leaving the graveyard and then entering the graveyard.
You're literally pinging them for 2 every single black mana you have. That's quite silly.
You can use this in graveyard decks too. You don't have to be Madness. This thing is absurd.
It's really, really stupid. It's akin to Survival of the Fittest as your graveyard. If your graveyard is bigger enough, now every creature you draw is just your best creature in your deck.
Yep, and Takanuma, we got an Agadeem's Awakening level staple. Every 2-color black deck should be playing this. It's just an untapped black source. And then sometimes it mills you for 3 and brings back your best creature.
Yeah, Takanuma it's one of the best cards in this whole entire list.
Yeah, it might be the 2nd best card, 4th best card. I don't know.
It's hard to beat it. It's definitely the most versatile. If we're going purely by number of decks this card goes in, it's probably the 2nd best.
Maybe 3rd. I don't know. Battleguard Recovery is really good.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, but they're all really, really, really good cards.
You get the idea.
Especially if you talk about numbers. Mystical Retrieval. This is just a way to return instant sorceries from your graveyard to your hand, and it has flashback Recursive Recursion.
Recursive Recursion. Scrap Trawler. We're going to move on to Artifacts. This is like kind of the card I think of when I think of artifact decks or reasons to play an artifact deck. It's so annoying, and when you have sacrifice outlets and stuff, I was doing this the other day. I had a card that says, when you cast an artifact, deal 2 to each opponent. It's like, okay, well, I'll play Ornithopter, and then I'll sacrifice my Ornithopter, sacrifice a 1-drop, get back Ornithopter, play it, sacrifice it, and you just keep going down the chain, and it's really annoying. You have to kill it, or it's just Value City and Recursion City.
Yeah, and it works really well with Mirror Retriever, which is just single time when it dies, get back an artifact from your graveyard to your hand. There's just loops. First thing is just a loop. Scrap Trawler, Mirror Retriever, they just go together and they just do infinite loops with things like KCI, Clark Clan Ironworks.
Yes, Trading Post is kind of your catch-all. It does a bunch of stuff poorly, which kind of amounts to a playable card. One thing it can do is recur things.
Good way to do it in a Landslot, Buried Ruin. 2 mana, tap it, sacrifice it, put it in your graveyard, put an artifact from your graveyard to your hand. Really, really awesome. This actually has a ton of synergy if you're with Crucible Worlds.
I basically play this card all the time whenever I have an artifact deck.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly good in artifact because it's just a free roll. Artifact decks already are heavy on the colorless. You can definitely afford a colorless land as long as you're not in like that 4 or 5 color artifact deck.
I mean, it's like an MDFC that you play as a land and then use as a spell later.
Yeah, it's a strong spell. Like that is a strong effect. Going to lands. 2 really, really good ways to do it. Wrenn and 6, one of the best planeswalkers ever printed. Top 3 for sure.
I don't even think it's top 3 anymore.
No,
Is it number 3? Because I think Oko and Minsc and Boo are 1 and 2.
No, Wrenn and 6 is better
Then what?
than Minsc and Boo.
Is it?
I mean,
I guess it got banned, right?
it's banned in Legacy,
Yeah,
and it's one of the best cards in all of Modern.
Anyway, those are the 3. Let's say those are the 3. They'll lock it in.
Yeah, Wrenn and 6, absolutely absurd, but its plus is to return a land from your graveyard to your hand, super strong ability, and Life from the Loam, return 3 lands from your graveyard to your hand. Then this card says Dredge 3, which is so silly. It's recursive recursion! Instead of drawing, you put it into your hand and mill 3. Super strong. Life from the Loam is
It's an engine that fuels itself.
It is. It literally is an engine that fuels itself. Life from the Loam.
I've played turn 2 Life from the Loam, get back nothing plenty of times.
Yep, because it's that strong. This card is that good. And though all the stuff we just went over is recursion that kind of is more generic and kind of fits into big themes, you can be more hyper-specific. And I love these hyper-specific ones. They're really interesting. Something like Lord of the Dead. This is recursion for purely zombies. This card is incredible.
I think you said Lord of the Dead.
Yeah, whatever. Same exact thing. Lord of the Undead taps to return a zombie from your graveyard to your hand. Recursion on a zombie, on a lord. This card is awesome. Love to see it.
These are the type of cards you got to look for when you're building your specific deck, and you go, how can I add a little bit of extra recursion? Well, Lord of the Undead is obviously one. Tezzeret, Master of the Bridge, it's going to get back artifacts while also just being amazing. That +2, whew.
Yeah, you just have to make sure you're in a blue-black artifact deck. That's so hyper-specific.
But
when you're there, here's a way to get that exact effect. Life gain, Witch of the Moors. Love this card. As long as you've gained life in the end step, everyone sacrifice a creature except you. You put one from your graveyard to your hand.
Same with Healing Technique. You gain some life, return some stuff, maybe make a friend along the way. Nissa Vital Force, this is like your landfall type card. If you're playing a lands deck where you kind of want to plus or proliferate and then just ultimate her right away and say, sorry, Nissa, you're a sorcery. On the off chance you don't get to do that, you get to then, bring a permanent back.
Yeah, exactly, which is incredibly strong to have as a versatility part of this card. Again, landfall decks, like you said. And Call to the Netherworld is your Madness one. If you're playing Madness, you can cast this for the 0 Madness cost that it has. Play it all the time. It's super good. And actually, all these recursion spells are incredibly good. So good that you should be playing Graveyard Hate, as we tell you in this video right here. Peace out, Tribe Scouts.